Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. We are reviewing Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice 2. Isn't there something else where if you say it 3 times, they come? Anyway, Beetlejuice 2. This has been a long time coming. And for many, they probably wished it had never come. Not everything should have a sequel. The 1988 original, Beetlejuice. What did we like about it? What was it we liked about it? It was the kind of blokey charm. Well, not charm. The blokey, chaotic, anarchic, splenitic, avant-garde, robustly politically incorrect, at a time where really political correctness wasn't so important. Beetlejuice, Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice, was all the wrong attributes a man should have, all rolled into one living dead person. And he was like a jester, he was like the sort of master of ceremonies, he was just a bad boy. A bad working class boy, or a blue collar chap who, as we discover in this film, I don't know if we discover in the other film, that he was a grave digger. That was his job in the real world. He's a lad. He's a proper lad. He's an unrectified, unrenaissanceified man. He's shamelessly sexist and inappropriate. And I think that's what we all liked about the first film. Now, what you have to remember is the first film, Tim Burton, this was back in the days when Tim Burton hadn't got his kind of vibe or a sort of ooze, or he didn't have his kind of, you couldn't have said, oh, this is a Tim Burton film necessarily back then. And it felt like something like nothing else that had come out, in '88. It had a similar feel to it, though of course it's completely different to sort of Ghostbusters. It was comic, but also a bit scary. And the thing that I think made the first Beetlejuice not just scary but creepy was that vein that I think it mined really well, which is the balance between comedy and horror, comedy and disgusting, comedy and dark. And it went there in a similar-ish sort of way. I think what we forget often with Ghostbusters is the first Ghostbusters film was quite a resolutely kind of grown-up film. Bill Murray it was grown-up, stand-up humour, and there was an element, though Michael Keaton wasn't a stand-up comedian, there was an element of stand-up, improvisation and all that kind of stuff to the first Beetlejuice. So that's what I loved it. We all loved it. Everyone loved it. It had its own vibe. It slayed, whatever all the Gen Zers say. It also had lots of practical effects, and that was more a kind of consequence of the time. In those days, a lot of models were made, a lot of masks were made, heads were kind of put on bodies, puppets were made, all that kind of stuff. So it was practical effects, real effects, and that as well, I've always said and always maintained. That's why I think made the early Star Wars films more successful in their monster creation. And it also made films like this and films like Ghostbusters almost a bit creepier, because there was a practical reality to these things. So here we are, Beetlejuice 2. That's enough about Beetlejuice 1. What I'm trying to say here is it's a tough act to follow. You're dicing with death. You're dicing with the afterlife if you in any way vaguely think you can repeat the successes of the original. Now, Tim Burton's gone to great lengths to say this is not a franchise-rinsing sequel, but the very nature of anything being a sequel means it's a little bit franchise-rinsing. It's done I wanted to wait to see how its box office did over the first weekend. It's done incredibly well. I think it's the third highest opening this year, and I think it has the highest ever opening, does it, in a September weekend or something like that? Curious. Anyway, it's done very well. So what is Beetlejuice 2? Well, Beetlejuice 2, we picked the story up with Lydia, Winona Ryder. She's a seance. She's a sort of host, if you like, of a bit of a kind of Tim Pot TV show. It's like a paranormal show, and so she sees the dead, and yet interestingly, her daughter Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega, says, you can't be very good because you've never seen my dead dad, which is a really good point. And you sort of think, yeah, if you're that good, why can't you see the most sort of apt and appropriate person for your child? So you've got Lydia, back from the original, Winona Ryder. She's grown up. Let's not forget the storyline in the original was pretty dark. She was groomed. She was enticed. She was essentially Beetlejuice tried to drag her into an almost underage marriage. It was quite, what's the word? It was quite a bit of toxic masculinity in the first film. So we've got Lydia. We've of course got her mum. What's her mum's name? Delia. Is Delia her mum? Yeah, her stepmother rather. And so in this film it's established we've got Lydia. She's in a relationship with Justin Theroux, who's this great sort of, almost the kind of the grand, what do they call him? The Grand Mortino or whatever it is. You know, he's like one. He's kind of got a real widow's peak, dark eyebrows, and he's kind of he's the comic foil. He's a hopeless. He's a guilty pleasure. Hopeless. He's funny. He's camp. His spineless aspirations are so on show that almost every line he utters is just ick. In fact, he is walking ick. He makes you sick with ick. He's a dick who makes you sick because he's so icky, and he's very good at it, and he has fun with it. He relishes it. He's shallow, he's dumb, he's only with Lydia because he wants to make the money, and he wants her to kind of, you know, he doesn't care what it takes. And he now also wants to try and be a stepfather to Astrid. And Astrid, of course, is played by Jenna Ortega, who, of course, has history with Tim Burton, she's made a huge success with him of Wednesday. So she's in here. So we've got the three generations. You've got Lydia, Winona Ryder, you've got her daughter, Astrid, Jenna Ortega, and then you've got the stepmom, who is Delia, played by Catherine O'Hara from the original film. Now, it's important to note that one particular absence from the original film is Charles Dietz, which is Lydia, Winona Ryder's father, played by Jeffrey Jones. Now, he's kind of in this, but not played by the actor, because, of course, the actor, Jeffrey Jones, is a convicted sex offender and is on basically the sex register and got up to all sorts of terrible things. And I was kind of surprised after the event when I discovered what he'd got up to and what he'd done and how terrible he's been. I was even surprised that this film stepped close to even having, admittedly, a body with a shark bite that's taken the top end of the body out. But that was playing him. And we did have a few moments, like at the memorial and the funeral, images of this guy and the original actor. I think they could have navigated around that completely. But anyway, that's his notable absence is for a very, very good reason. So the plot essentially runs that Lydia, she's starting to see Beetlejuice is popping up in her visions. Winona Ryder, Lydia, gets a call from her stepmom. Her stepmom says, your dad's gone missing. He's dead too, so he's gone to the underworld. Astrid has an argument with Lydia because she thinks her mum's being a sort of idiot and she's having the wool pulled over her eyes by this absolute moron that is Justin Theroux. She runs off, and then she runs off into the arms of a young chap who seems so lovely. So she has a sort of teen romance. And now I have to say this, the trailer gave such a bump to it. Really like the first trailer, and then the second trailer felt like it was a really workmanlike kind of derivative kind of riff on things like high school musical type shows, Riverdale, is it, all that kind of stuff. It was set in a school. There is school bits in this, but that's not what this film is about at all. I thought the second trailer really dropped the ball and made me feel, we're just going to get something that's quite generic. Here's the top line on the story in this film. Essentially, we get to a similar place where eventually Beetlejuice has got Lydia to sign a contract to marry him again in order to save Astrid, Jenna Ortega, who has got herself embroiled in a pretty dangerous and toxic teenage romance with this boy who she's run off and met. And so that's kind of the storyline, really. And so we go, variously, we go down into the afterlife, we come back out of the afterlife. There's all those classic moments where they call Beetlejuice's name, and Justin Theroux does it because he doesn't believe that it's a thing, and then here pops up Beetlejuice in the attic of the house, and there's the toy set of the toy town, and the crack develops, and then you've got the little neon sign that says Beetlejuice. So this film does that thing that I think the Ghostbusters Afterlife did. It successfully ticks all of the nostalgia buttons. The music is sensational. I was taken directly back to 1988. Wonderful opening, kind of helicopter droney shot moving through the village, the wonderful suburbs, going up to the house, and then finding Lydia or whichever character was in the top floor of the house where Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin were, and all that kind of stuff. Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, notable for their complete absence from the film too, and from the storyline. So basically the story moves along the lines of really all of these women are needing to pull upon Beetlejuice's help and guidance and support from the afterlife to prevent Justin Theroux from marrying, two things: to prevent Justin Theroux from marrying Lydia, and also to rescue Astrid, Jenna Ortega, from this dark and twisted potential soul exchange. So this boy, Jeremy Fraser, who she falls in love with, all the clues were there, all the hints were there. He was nice, he was cool, he was lovely. He kind of knew quite a bit, though, about the afterlife. She sort of stumbled on a bike. She rode away from Justin Theroux's kind of marriage proposal. She slammed into a tree, landed under the tree that he was in. But what we discover, he was in the treehouse, what we discover is that she's fallen in love with a ghost. And at first you think, oh, that's sweet. Well, actually, to be honest with you, I thought something more sophisticated had happened. I thought when she'd cycled off, nearly got killed, didn't, fell off the road, landed on the bottom of the tree. In the treehouse is the boy Jeremy. I thought when she hit the tree, she might have actually really died. And so she'd already died. But of course, in Beetlejuice land, in the law and rules of Beetlejuice the films, when you die, you go down to that waiting room, don't you? Where there's all the people on the sofa who've been chopped in half and they've got like shrunken heads and all that kind of stuff, don't you? You go and sit there and you wait interminably for this incredibly attractive but dead sort of till operator who will give you a number and she'll call you up and something will happen. Anyway, so she didn't go there, so I thought, no, she can't actually be dead. But anyway, he's a ghost. But he's not a nice ghost, though. He's not like a ghost that she's just fallen in love with. He's like a nasty ghost, because actually what this film does, and it goes there, and I like the fact that the film goes there, is he's killed both his parents. He's put an angle grinder in his dad's face, or a chainsaw, and he's put a kind of a sort of whisk in his mum's eyes. And so they're dead in the house. He's got her in. He's got her to read this kind of, spell, opens the door, he goes down, he swaps his soul, he makes her dead, he gets alive, and he's going to escape. And so basically Beetlejuice is kind of recruited as a sort of bounty hunter. He's pulled in to kind of save the day. Which all of which sort of sounds interesting. And the weird thing is, I've talked about all of this so far, and I haven't really talked about Beetlejuice, have I? Because this is the weirdest thing about this. This film clocks in at what? It clocks in about an hour and 3/4. Beetlejuice is barely in it. And I'm trying to remember, was that the case with the original film? Was he barely in it either? And was that actually what made it all the richer? Because I found myself coming out of this film thinking, I could have done with a bit more Beetlejuice. I'd have liked a little bit more Beetlejuice, because you are constantly spending the film begging, gagging for, waiting, urging, and then when he arrives, relishing the few little tidbits that Beetlejuice throws at you. He is as splenetic and as funny as he was in the first. There was an element of age that had kicked in. There were a couple of moments where they encouraged him to, or he was asked to in a scene, run. And you could see that he's that little bit older. And some of his lines, some of the kind of speed with which he delivers his quick-witted kind of acerbic kind of observations, there was just a slightly, I'd have possibly even just sped them up in the edit just to help him out. Other moments were really good, but he's very good at the quips. He's very good at the one-liners. He's very good at actually throwing lines out there when the special effects of, say, his head twisting around 4 times, or sort of all the kind of goo and gump coming out, when there's a moment where he's pretending to be a sort of couples therapist and he said, let's spill our guts, spills all the guts out of his stomach. He's very good at that kind of physical, almost pratfall kind of comedy, but there was an element of, he's got older, he's a bit older, he can't deliver the lines as quickly, he's not as crisp as he was. So, but I just can't tire of him. He's great, and I find myself really, really exploring not his sort of 5 o'clock shadow, but his midnight witching hour midnight moss, which he's got kind of around the sides of his face. There's another entirely different, separate. Well, in fact, there's 2 or 3 other completely almost separate storylines that are running in conjunction with the main thrust of the plot, and I think that's where one of my major criticisms of this film lies. Too many storylines were charging along, and actually this is a film that has too many characters, and that's not to say that every one of them isn't actually in and of themselves quite watchable and quite funny and entertaining. But in a weird way, I tell you what this film falls foul of. It falls foul of not really delivering enough of anyone, and so consequently Justin Theroux, very funny, very witty, liked him, but then fades away fast for the rest of the film. Catherine O'Hara, always very good. But she's much more of a supportive role. There's only so much you can take of Winona Ryder. She is odd. She's strange. We all thought, I think every one of us has thought, God, she's got even stranger since we've seen her in Stranger Things. She delivers her lines in a weird way, but that's not a bad thing. It kind of suits the role. It suits Tim Burton's universe, and it suits the film and all of its kind of interests and predilections and all that kind of stuff. Jenna Ortega is icy. I have to say, almost every role she plays, she's got a sort of. She's charming. She's mischievous. She's cheeky. She's sharp and she's intelligent. But she's quite stony-faced, so she's always quite inscrutable, and that's okay. but it's a bit one note. It's a bit one note, and sometimes I was sort of urging her to kind of soften a little bit, and she didn't. Beetlejuice. Willem Dafoe plays a cop, but he's not just any old cop. He's actually an actor who wanted to be a cop, or was acting a cop, or he's a cop who wanted to be an actor. Anyway, so there's lots of kind of riffs and jokes about him sort of retaking, let's reset and let's do the scene again, and him wanting to kind of, he's always saying to people, keep it real and be authentic and just be yourself and all this kind of stuff. And he's trying, and he's funny, and he keeps running into certain scenes. He's dead, he's got half his brain showing. But he never really went anywhere. But he was entertaining, and you get some classic Willem Dafoe kind of eccentric little moments there. And then the other one is you've got Monica Bellucci, who is essentially Beetlejuice's ex, or Beetlejuice's wife, or jilted wife. Anyway, she's on a mission to get him back, gain revenge. And there's a great moment where she sort of pieces herself back together. She literally staples. She lands in kind of suitcases. Danny DeVito is playing a zombie who's kind of clearing some corridor. I can't remember. Was he in the first one? Maybe he was. He's clearing the corridor or something anyway, and so he knocks over a couple of suitcases with body parts in, quite dark, and then she staples her face together, staples her arms on. There's a sort of weariness to the way in which she constructs herself as this beautiful, statuesque, almost Amazonian woman, and I liked her sort of weariness. And then she goes around, and it's really wonderful. You think she lifts people up, and you think, oh, she's going to give them a great big kiss, lucky way to die. But no, she sucks the oxygen out of them, though they're already dead, so I'm guessing she's sucking the dead air, which must be pretty horrible coming out of Danny DeVito's mouth. She sucks them up. She sucks whatever their energy is, and they become a shriveled little gloopy sack. I liked that. And again, these are all practical effects. All the practical effects in this film are excellent. They really speak to that thing that I don't feel I've kind of described well enough, which is sometimes a practical effect can make things feel creepier than if they were CGI'd or done with digital enhancement or all that kind of stuff. Sometimes practical effects, things that are literal, props and all that kind of stuff that don't look entirely believable. The fact that they're not that believable makes them even creepier, because you think they're in the real world. This is a real thing. This will have felt something. It makes it creepier. It succeeds, and I think this film really succeeds in that department. All of the practical effects throughout this, whether it be all of Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice now works in this way. It doesn't work. He sits with his feet up, doesn't he? And he's got loads of minions in suits with shrunken. There's lots of shrunken-headed people now who are great, and none of them can talk because their mouths are tied up. They all look real. These are clearly real actors with kind of real kind of puppet heads on and all that kind of stuff. They were great. All that stuff works really well. Anyway, Monica Bellucci, she's charging around trying to find Beetlejuice. And there is, I have to say, I know a couple of critics haven't liked it, but there is one really, really funny black and white flashback sequence which takes us back to the origin, what gives us the origin story of how Beetlejuice met Dolores, or the Monica Bellucci character, and how she was sex mad and dragged him off to a kind of, a sort of, a stately home and shagged him senseless, and he's exhausted. And this was a very sort of arched, and it was all done in Italian, and you had subtitles. I thought it was hysterical. And I think this film was at its best when it goes off on the most sort of outlandish Monty Python-esque, totally surreal junction. It shoots off in different areas. I mean, another great one for me was also like how in the first film they had the Banana Boat, was it, song, which was where they all started to dance. At the end of this film, where there's another wedding situation, and we've got Beetlejuice again trying to get married, make the marriage work. They played a piece called, or they sang to a song called MacArthur Park, which I didn't know before, by Richard Harris, the actor of Dumbledore and all that kind of stuff. And that was really funny too. It was very different to the first film, which had that deo, and all that kind of stuff. But it was nice. It was this idea of kind of controlling, all the characters were controlled by this song. And this film, and I think the whole world of Beetlejuice, is absolutely at its best when it's not trying to tell us a story per se. Obviously, there's a story of sorts. But when it's just allowing itself to go off into the land of complete afterlife surrealism. And I think the first film had a much simpler story, and this film really, really got bogged down in an unnecessarily overcomplicated narrative. You've got so many couple narratives going on, and then you get Beetlejuice come in, and he starts to want to try and marry Lydia again. All these bits didn't kind of coalesce in the right way. What I would say though is I really, really enjoyed it. I wasn't bored. I was frustrated by the storyline. I laughed a lot. I wanted more Beetlejuice, but I didn't just want more Beetlejuice, because I kind of settled into the fact that, okay, maybe Beetlejuice isn't about having too much Beetlejuice. Maybe what makes Beetlejuice great is that we have him rationed. But what I had in the end was every other character was Russian too. When I wanted more Justin Theroux, I didn't get more of him. When I wanted more Beetlejuice, I didn't get more of him. When I perhaps wanted a little bit more Willem Dafoe, didn't get more of him. I like it when Beetlejuice sort of takes you into the rules of dying. I think the ordinary, yes, the sort of almost extraordinarily ordinary rules of what it means to die and how you check in, and you've almost got your work tag and then you're given a sort of visa and a passport, and then you head off. I could have done with even more of where they go and where they end up. The Monica Bellucci plot didn't really go anywhere. It was kind of, she was like a giant version of Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride. So in a weird way, this film sort of fell foul of being incredibly ambitious, having far too many narrative threads, and them all in a weird way unnecessarily complicating something that at its heart, really was almost a successful revisit and repackaging and reversioning of the whole Beetlejuice kind of universe. So in summary, what would I say? Would I recommend this? This film does achieve that incredibly unusual thing, which is it manages to be quite rude, very suggestive, politically incorrect, which is quite refreshing. I mean, there's one moment in this film where Michael Keaton, or Beetlejuice, looks at a woman who walks past him in a sort of really lascivious and kind of inappropriate way. And it really makes you realise how far we've come from even then. Because when he does it in the first film, you think, oh, he's a creep. And he's still a creep. But my God, our intolerance of that kind of the unacceptability of that kind of behaviour, in a weird way, makes him an even bigger and better guilty pleasure. And I genuinely think we needed a few more scenes. For me, it was the story arc. It was the story beat points. It kept feeling the need to keep driving us into new storylines or a new chapter heading or whatever. We just didn't need it. We just needed to sit with fewer characters, actually. We lent on Winona Ryder an awful lot, and she's good and she's quirky, but I don't think she should have carried it as much as she should have done. She did. What I would say though, overall, this is definitely my favourite Tim Burton film in many years. And ironically, that was because, it couldn't be more a Tim Burton film because it's a Beetlejuice remake and he made Beetlejuice and defined Beetlejuice. But it felt so unlike so many of the other Tim Burton films we've seen in recent years, where all the characters seem to be sort of photoshopped and there's a heavy use of CGI as well as, practical effects and what have you. This felt fresh. It felt fresh, and I do think that that's what I liked about the first film, was that Michael Keaton brought a freshness to it. I have to say, I think Justin Theroux brought a freshness to this too. All the actors brought their own freshness to it, but there were just too many of them, and they were all the storylines were competing far too much. You just got unnecessarily complicated, right down to there being a strange. Though I do have to say, I want the toy. If anyone sees that a character or a plush figure or an action figure or a wind-up AI toy, the Beetlejuice baby. That was dark and twisted. We end this film, or towards the end of this film, spoiler, Jenna Ortega's giving birth, and I thought they're not going to go there. Are we going to get an Alien Romulus moment where the fucking thing comes out and it starts suckling on her breast? No way. But Beetlejuice baby re-emerges for the second time in the film, and he's a nasty, snarling, sharp-toothed sort of chihuahua of a kind of, he's like Chucky crossed with something else, the sort of razor-bladed arse of a Jack Russell. Don't know where that came from. Nasty. Some say unnecessary. I like that. Again, I think this film should have gone there. Go for the really fucking wild, whacked out surreal shit. Why not? Why not? You're in the land of Beetlejuice. All rules are kind of out the window. There's no kind of coherence in Beetlejuice land. So anyway, what would I give this? I was pleasantly surprised. I really was. I will give this, I'd give this 73 out of 100. And as I say, family from 12 to 80 will enjoy this. There's something in this for all age groups, which is very unusual at the cinema these days.